Hey, good morning. It's Daryl here, aka Artist in Recovery. And once again, even though it's a cloudy, somewhat rainy, humid day, I am out on my bike ride. There's my baby. And today, it's a little confusing for me today because I'm going to talk about Aerosmith, and I've seen them at least 6 or 7 times, at least a half dozen times. There's 2 times in particular that I want to contrast, and I want to talk about these 2 times. Okay, let's get right into this. The first time I saw them, I believe it was the first time ever. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll look more into this. I'll talk more about Aerosmith in future concert diaries. It was 1986, Done with Mirrors. Now, I'm doing another concert diaries where I saw the Whitford St. Holmes band, and that's when Aerosmith was broken up, and Brad Whitford had his own band. They opened up for Blue Oyster Cult, and I saw him then. But let's stick to this concert. 1986, Hartford. No, New Haven, Connecticut. I know it was New Haven, Connecticut, because of the story I'm going to tell here. Before the concert, I was still kind of young at this point. I don't know. I was 20 years old. I'm almost 60 now. And me and my buddy were going to buy concert shirts outside, bootleg concert shirts. And the guy told us to come into a bar. It was this little dive bar in New Haven. The New Haven Coliseum doesn't even exist anymore. They imploded it. That was a great show. But anyway, we go into this bar, and there's two of us on each side sitting in a booth. And they put a couple shirts on the table. We're pulling out our money. We give them the money. And detectives come running up to the table, whip out their badges. They bust the guys for selling bootleg shirts. Me and my buddy are shitting. We're thinking we're going to get arrested. The cops pretty much just ignored us. Grabbed all the shirts and the money off the table, told us to get the F out of there, and that was it. So I didn't get a shirt I was always on tight funds when I was younger, and that was my shirt money, and it was gone. That's one of the things I remember most about this concert. The other part of this concert, this is kind of sad. Like I said, we were in New Haven, and he says, "Hello, Hartford." Steven Tyler says, "Hello, Hartford." Like I said, except we're in New Haven. And the whole crowd just kind of went. I never heard a crowd go so quiet like that. It was kind of sad. I love Steven Tyler. This is my band. Tyler's on the cover of Time magazine, coincidentally, and I'll talk about that in a future video. I've said this before. If there's one person, living or dead, you could sit like on a park bench and talk to for an hour, Steven Tyler would probably be the guy I'd pick. Before Jesus Christ, before George Washington, I'd probably pick Steven Tyler. And he was a mess. I believe Joe Perry was back with the band at this point, but I don't think Brad Whitford was. And I can't tell you one song off the Done with Mirrors. Honestly, I hate to say this, but it was their worst album. It was just, the band was a mess, and Steven Tyler, I hate to say this, was a mess. He didn't stagger around the stage, but he kind of moped. That's what I remember. There were stories back then that he was doing second all and two and all. That was the OxyContin of the day. They were barbiturates, and he would put them in his scarf. There's actually been interviews where he talked about doing this, and he put the pills in his scarf and take them during the show. I mean, that's, being a recovered addict myself, I know. A lot of people would say, well, why don't you just take them before the show? When being a recovering addict, you need so many so often that I could understand why he would put them in his scarf. Unfortunately, I could understand that. I've been clean and sober for almost coming up on 19 years, just coincidentally. October 23rd will be 19 years. Okay. And then it got even worse after the show. We were up, and the parking garage was on top of the Coliseum, New Haven Coliseum. And I don't know how I ran into this guy. He was selling his wares, and it was raw opium. All right. And he ended up giving me his phone number. And I ended up going into business with him. This is stuff I'm not proud of. I'll talk more about this in a future video, because that's not really what this video is about. But it wasn't a good thing. It did not bode well for my life. All right, let's move on now to 1998. I can't remember the tour. This tour, it was, I could lay awake just to hear you breathing. I don't want to miss a moment, that one. 1998, Hartford, okay? Now, I bought the tickets for this, and I had been promising two different girls. Like, I wasn't the best person back then. I'm not the same person now. I was dating a couple different people and dealing, and these girls were friends. Later, honestly, they became girlfriends. That's a whole nother story. But I had been promising one and then the other back and forth. Like, I'll take you. Oh, forget her, I'll take you. And they ended up hating each other. They ended up fighting each other, as a matter of fact, because of me. Another thing I'm not proud of. So I ended up taking, we'll call her Roseanne, not Julie. This is part of the story. This is why I had to leave the show early, and I hope she doesn't mind if I tell you the story. The show was great. Steven Tyler was much better. I don't know. He was clean. To be honest, he was probably in between relapses, because I think during this period he was clean a lot of the time, but he also relapsed. I mean, to me, I say this, a lot of acts don't agree with it, but I say relapse is part of recovery, because I relapsed myself like 3 times in 1 year before I finally got clean. So he was clean, and the show was phenomenal. I remember him doing a fucking backflip on stage, and it just blew my mind. I mean, he was considerably old. He's 70, 80 now, 70. He was 50. He was probably my age back then, and I can't do any freaking backflip now. He did a backflip on stage. It just blew me away, man. The difference between the way he looked in 1986 and the way he looked in 1998 was just unfreaking believable. He was so much better clean. I also saw Aerosmith close the show for Guns N' Roses and Deep Purple at Giant Stadium. And I'm going to talk about that. That is probably the concert of a lifetime, and I'm going to have to unpack that one another time. So I've seen Aerosmith at least, 8 times. I'm going to have to write it down and count them. Okay, so they're about 6 or 7 songs into the show. 1998. This is in Hartford, I believe. Hartford, New Haven, same thing. And I'm with Ro, and she passes out. She just, all of a sudden, she just like sinks to the ground. I believe I was with her brother. It was me. So we carried her out, and she almost died. Her blood pressure, there was medics there, and they checked her blood pressure, and it was like 70 over nothing, or it was just a bizarre bad number, and she was still unconscious. I'll tell you guys the whole truth. It turns out it was what they call a tubal pregnancy, and she recovered, luckily, but she almost died that night. We had to leave the show early, so we didn't see the whole rest of the show. But Steven Tyler kicked ass for what I did see. All right. Like I said, I hope you guys aren't disappointed in, I'm telling you guys the memories of, I'm a Gen Xer. I was using a lot during those times. And these are just straightforward videos where I tell you a lot of things that don't have to do with the music and the sound. It's the stuff I remember from the show, and I'm hoping a lot of you can relate to that, being probably my age or around my age, and you could kind of relate. Anyway, recovery is possible. I just want to say that after all this talk. And I'll talk more about Aerosmith in upcoming shows. All right. Concert Diaries. Tomorrow, I'll have another one. I'll either talk about Van Halen. I already have a Blue Oyster Cult Foghat episode already done and ready to download, so maybe you'll see that tomorrow. Have a good Friday.